One of my favourite tanks that came about as the part of the Age of Darkness Heresy 2.0 release was the massive semi-Sicaran, semi-Predator styled Kratos. It is, in my opinion, just a super cool, massive, imposing centerpiece style tank. Like, it's almost the same size as a Spartan, and it looks and feels cool to have it and to see it on the battlefield. So when 10th edition came around and it got relegated to Legends, a lot of people, myself included, were rightly saddened. It was just a really almost brand new style of tank, and for GW to basically hand wave it away for a significant chunk of the player base so quickly was just really quite annoying and really dumb. However, it is important to remember it is still usable. Legends units are still 100% legal and playable if you are at home, if you are with friends, even if you are playing in local stores and clubs. It is still technically legal. The only place you can't use Legends units is in official tournaments, which does suck, don't get me wrong. I know a lot of people only really care about tournament play, so that is annoying for them. But I would say, certainly for me, and for a good 50% plus of players, you can still use these units, maybe not in every single game you have, but whenever you're just playing with friends or testing out lists or playing in local, stores or whatever, you shouldn't have any issue in bringing these units along. And if someone tries to kind of say they're not usable or legal, they are. GW have literally said they are. It's only in official tournaments where they're not. And so with that in mind, also chiefly because I am strongly considering getting one of these to add to my Dark Angels, I thought we would take a look at one of the Legends units, and we're going to take a look at the Kratos, see what we think, see what the rules are like, see what the cost is like, and basically consider if we think it is any good. It is, as I said, one of the newest and coolest Marine units that they've had recently, so I really like it, but let's see how the rules stack up against some of the other units that the Space Marines have access to. The Kratos tank comes in at a cool 245 points, which may seem like a lot in comparison to some other popular tanks at the moment, like the Gladiator variants and even the Repulsor Executioner. But for those 245 points, you are actually getting quite a lot in terms of your profile. Compared to, say, the 220 point Repulsor, which brings you a Toughness 12, 16 wound, 3-up save stat line, the Kratos does bump that up in a couple of genuinely impressive ways. You get the same Toughness 12, but you get 2 extra wounds going up to 18, and you also get a massively improved 2-up save, which really does make you a lot more durable against enemy firepower. So for a mere 25 points, I think that is a significant upgrade. You also get the excellent 10-inch move to allow you to get into range of the enemy. You get the expected leadership of 6. You also get an OC of 6-2, which is a little bit better than some equivalent vehicles like the Executioner and the Astra Militarum Rogel Dawn. It does mean you actually have a chance of pipping an objective from an opponent like 5 Terminators in a pinch. I mean, it's not like you want this tank going near Terminators, but if you do need to take an objective to win a game and there are 5 Terminators on it, you can actually go and steal it from them with this tank, whereas some others just can't quite get there because of their OC of 5. So, I mean, in terms of pure durability, it is actually fairly good. In terms of anti-armor guns like las cannons, you are looking at around 18 shots to take out a Kratos, and even something like the 2-shot heavy laser destroyer of the Repulsor Executioner will need around 4 shooting phases, so almost an entire game, to reliably take out the last wound of your Kratos. So it is very tanky. It's got some fantastic defense against light arms fire thanks to toughness 12, and against the stronger anti-tank guns, those 18 wounds and that 2-up save will go a long way to keeping you alive. So this tank will be sticking around for quite a long while, and it can quite feasibly make it all the way to the end of the game unless your opponent really does focus it down. So for its tag, durability wise, I like it. I think it is good and arguably a bit of an improvement on things like the Repulsor Executioner, but also it does have some reasonably good output too. And again, for that reasonable 245 point price tag, there is a lot of potential in this vehicle for actually putting the hurt onto the enemy. The stock loadout for the Kratos is the Kratos Battle Cannon, 4 heavy bolters and an autocannon, which is a pretty good number of shots. The Battle Cannon has 2 profiles. It's either 1 shot armor piercing, which is strength 18, minus 4 AP, d6 plus 3 damage with heavy, or the more anti-infantry high explosive shot, which instead nets you d6 plus 3 shots with blast, and is strength 10, minus 1 AP, and 3 damage. Being just 1 shot, the anti-armor profile is admittedly kinda meh. It nets you just under 4 damage into a Rhino profile, which is not great considering it's a 1-shot gun, but the high explosive version is very good at killing infantry, and it's also quite solid into light and medium vehicles. Compared to the armor piercing version, the HE round causes just over 4 damage to the same Rhino, so it is actually better than the single shot against those light and medium vehicles. And then of course it has the added bonus of being much better into things like 10-man squads of Marines or Terminators or even Custodes, thanks to that flat 3 damage. However, if you want a more focused gun, because the Battle Cannon is very much a generalist gun, it can be decent into tanks and good into infantry. If you want something a bit more focused though, the Battle Cannon can instead be swapped out for the pure anti-armor of the Melter Blast gun. And the Melter Blast gun is a 24-inch range, 4-shot melter gun. It fires at strength 12, minus 4 AP and d6 damage, and it of course does have Melter 2, so when you are within 12 inches, you can be chucking out up to 8 damage per shot. Against something like a Repulsor, you are looking at between 7 to 8 damage in a single volley, and against a toughness 9 tank like a Rhino, around 9.7, so it's really feasible and arguably likely to be one-shotting enemy Rhinos and Chimeras with this thing, and against an Oath of Moment target, even things like the slightly more durable Eldari Fire Prisms should fall in a single volley from this gun. So this is really good at taking out armor, and again, as I said, especially if you tie it in with Oath of Moment, you can get a lot of hits, you can do a lot of damage, and if you are within 12 inches, you can very reliably take out anything up to sort of like heavy tanks quite well. If you like to gamble a bit more though, and you like the game of fishing for sixes, then instead the final main gun option is the Volkite Cardinal, and this might just be for you. This gorgeous looking gun is a flat 9 shots, it's got a 36-inch range, and it hits on 3s, it's strength 9, flat 3 damage, and it has devastating wounds. Now it has no native AP, which is a big problem for it, but on the other hand, again, if you like to be a gambler, you can massively spike this thing and end up doing a load of damage if you manage to get a few lucky 6s that your opponent won't be able to save against. The basic math comes out to a pretty mediocre 3 damage to an enemy Rhino, but that isn't taking into account the devastating wounds. When you factor that in, it actually comes out to a much more respectable 5 damage to a Rhino and nearly 7 damage against an Oath of Moment target, so it isn't terrible at anti-tank. And then of course against 3 wound targets like Terminators or Custodes, this can be devastating, although slightly less so against the Custodes because they get that feel no pain against devastating wounds, but against Terminators this thing can be brutal. On average from the shooting you will get at least 1 6 to wound, so that means 1 dead Terminator with no saves of any kind, and then just through sheer weight of dice you can reliably get another couple of wounds through their saves, so this gun can do a good job of chewing through 2 or maybe even 3 Terminators a turn, and that definitely does add up over the course of the game, especially since you're going to be firing at them from a reasonably safe 36 inches away. So all the big guns have a few good things going for them as well as a few downsides, but of course that isn't all. The 4 heavy bolters that the Kratos comes with can also be swapped out. 2 can be changed for 2 autocannons, 2 las cannons, or 2 Volkite calivers, whilst the other 2 can be swapped for 2 heavy flamers, 2 las cannons, or 2 Volkite culverins. Obviously, a loadout with the battle cannon or the melter blast gun and 4 las cannons, for instance, can net you some very potent anti-armor firepower, and definitely seems like a good bet if you are going into things like enemy knights or mech heavy guard. But equally, you can still run the gambling game and potentially go full Volkite. You can take the Cardinal, 2 calivers, and 2 culverins, and that will net you a grand total of 21 shots, all with devastating wounds, and all doing at least 2 damage. And I mean, that really could be terrifying. Just in devastating wound output alone against an Oath of Moment target, you could be getting nearly 8 damage, which would be unsavable, and that's not counting any extra that would come through from failed saving throws. So if you are feeling lucky, or you have a way to get reroll wounds from your detachment or from any, nearby rules or stratagems or whatever it may be, you can potentially spike this and get a load of devastating wounds into opponents and just get a load of unsavable damage into them. The tank also comes stock with an autocannon, which is a pretty nice bonus. They're nothing too exciting, but again, 2 extra strength 9 3 damage shots isn't to be sniffed at. That gun alone has a 40% chance or so of killing an Oathed Terminator, so it certainly will do a lot of work over the course of a game. Across 5 turns, you can reasonably expect it to kill at least 2 Terminators, so it can add up. It's definitely not a gun you should be forgetting about. And then you can also take a choice of a Hunter Killer missile for that extra 1 shot at strength 14 d6 damage, as well as a choice of pintle guns. You can take a heavy bolter, a combi weapon, you can even take a multi-melter. Now, I would take the multi-melter just for those 2 extra anti-light armor shots, but I mean, the heavy bolter option could suit you better if you are going for pure anti-infantry, for instance. Overall though, I think in general my pick for this tank would be the melter or the battle cannon, and then 4 las cannons and the multi-melter and the hunter killer missile. That gives you a lot of firepower. It gives you at least 7 reasonably strong anti-tank shots, and even if the only target you have is light infantry, you still have the option, if you go for the battle cannon, for those d6 plus 3 blast shots. So you can do really, really well into vehicles, and if you only have infantry to target, you can still go well into them. And I mean, an extra 2 melter shots and 4 las cannon shots, yes, it's not ideal going into Space Marines, but you're going to fairly reliably kill a couple of extra ones, so it's not going to be a complete waste going into something like that if you've killed all the other armor on the battlefield. All told, with an example of the melter blast gun, 4 las cannons, the autocannon, the multi-melter, and the hunter killer missile, you can comfortably put over 16 damage into an oathed enemy knight, or you can outright kill a land raider, doing around 18 wounds to it. So for that 245 point tag, it can make its points back really quite well. In just a round or 2 of shooting, you can get your points back on the Kratos just by going into those good targets. What I also really like about the Kratos is that it is quite hard to pin down. It's got a unique rule line breaker, which allows it not only to shoot blast weapons into engagement range, which is really nice for that high explosive round from the battle cannon, but on top of that, you also don't get the penalty to hit when you are in engagement range, so you are basically using this tank at full effectiveness, even if your opponent is trying to bog you down by charging squads into you in melee and, stop you from falling back. You can just keep on shooting away to clear that squad engaging you, and then get back to killing the rest of your opponent's army without really feeling like you've been nerfed in any way. Of course, while the stat line is great in and of itself, we also get some solid use for the Kratos in a few choice detachments. The Iron Storm is of course fantastic for it, giving you that hit, wound, or damage reroll, which obviously can make a big difference for something like the Melter Blast Gun or the Armor Piercing Battle Cannon shot, whilst a few stratagems, Power of the Machine Spirit allows you to really punish an enemy that's trying to destroy your tank by letting you fire back to it in your opponent's shooting phase, And then even something like Mercier's Weakness is potentially fantastic if you are going for a full Volkite build, because this will net you a huge amount of hits, especially into a vehicle where you're getting 5+ as the sustain. So you can get a huge number of hits, and that will obviously turn into even more devastating wounds, making it much more likely that you will be able to punch through tougher enemy units like knights and heavy tanks. Elsewhere, detachments like the Firestorm bring you some extra mobility by giving you assault on your weapons, as well as giving you +1 strength when you are within 12 inches. And that means that there are a few key breakpoints you could potentially reach. You could get strength 13 on your melter blast gun, strength 10 on your multi-melter, or strength 13 on your las cannons, all of which will, as I said, bring you to nice breakpoints against toughness 12 or toughness 9 targets, and so we'll be able to massively boost the damage you can do. All in all, I just really love the Kratos. I think it is an utterly stunning looking tank, if nothing else, but it does have some really, really good rules. It has got a great amount of flexibility in the loadout you take. It has got a really quite solid amount of damage output in terms of the guns that you can use. It's got good mobility with that 10-inch move and the capacity to not get bogged down by enemy melee units. And it's got a ton of durability for not a super excessive price. Yes, it's more expensive than the Executioner, and I would say a little bit worse on the damage front, but it is so much more survivable. You get 2 extra wounds, and you get that 2-up save, which really does make a big difference in games of 10th edition. And then even if you compare it to cheaper tanks like the Gladiator Lancer, yes, it is 85 points pricier, but for those 85 points, you get 6 extra wounds, you get 2 extra toughness, you get that better save, and I would argue overall, you get better damage output from the additional multi-melter, the las cannons, the hunter-killer missile, and all the other guns it can take. In my mind, the Kratos is a genuinely fearsome prospect for your opponent. It's got some really good firepower. It's going to be incredibly tough for your opponent to kill. And as I said earlier, against the right targets with the right loadout, you can make your points back with it in just a turn or two. So those are my thoughts on the Kratos battle tank. As always, I'd really love to know what you think, and also which of the main gun options would you pick if you were bringing one to your games of 10th edition? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.